Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. We're going to give it just a second here for people to trickle in before we kick off today's presentation about the roadmap to AI adoption for physical security companies. If you're just hopping in, thanks for joining us. Your camera and your audio have been turned off just to give everyone a really great viewing experience. But we definitely want to hear from you, so please feel free to drop any questions either in the chat section or in the Q&A box, and we will make sure we get to those by the end of today's session. We're scheduled for about 60 minutes. We've got a lot of really good content to get through. So I'll let Jordan and Johann dive in. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining. Sierra, thanks for organizing us, and really excited for today's topic. It's something that's top of mind for, not just security firms, but any firm out there, any business out there that's looking for a roadmap on how to adopt AI. There's a lot of buzzwords out there that we've seen, that some of our clients have approached us with, and the goal for today is to basically provide some information on how AI works, how it can be used in the security industry, and some risks that are involved and some watchouts of how security companies could make best use of this new technology. And then, of course, how security companies can adopt it safely in 2026. Without further ado, though, I'd love to first introduce Johann Hauswald. Johann, love to be a little intro here.
Thank you, Jordan. My name is Johann. I'm the CEO and founder of Plix. Plix is a workforce management platform that is enabled by AI body cameras. We're super excited to be serving the communities and businesses that protect our businesses of today. And the key difference with what we're building today with our platform is that we really want to enable the businesses that use our body cameras to drive more value and efficiency from a body worn that doesn't just record and store for evidentiary purposes. And so we're excited to show you how we do that, obviously using AI to really glean insights from footage and from information that is seen and heard out in the field.
Awesome. Great to have you here. Plix is another early stage startup like Belfry that's taken on some pretty big challenges that the industry has faced for decades, if not centuries. And we're really excited to have Johann here, a lot to represent Plix alongside Belfry. I'm Jordan Wallach, co-founder, CEO here at Belfry. We help security guard services firms run smarter back offices, provide great experiences to their clients, and ultimately great experiences to their officers as well. So with that, we'll dive right into the agenda for today as well. So what we're going to do, three main things. We're going to pressure test some real use cases for AI in the security industry. We're going to identify some risk zones. So security is a higher regulated industry than many others when it comes to wage and hour law, when it comes to incident reports or any activity that officers are doing and seeing in the field that can get brought into legal proceedings. So we'll identify what concerns security companies should have with this new technology that maybe just changes the way that security companies can adopt. The last part, how can you take away something today to start testing AI with in your day-to-day, or maybe even entertaining conversations with vendors that are out there as well. So first off, there's a lot of headlines that are out there, what you might have seen and heard about AI. Headlines around companies laying off workers because of AI. You might have seen these companies really invest a ton into new R&D costs or token costs. You might see just be using ChatGPT or Claude in your day-to-day and just testing around what it could help with in terms of writing emails or other content. So there's a lot here, and you're probably sick of hearing about it and all the promises that the news cycle seems to make. But ultimately, how we can try to find the signal through the noise is through just looking at the technology itself. Johann, curious what you've been hearing similarly to these headlines here.
Yeah, definitely. You hear a lot of, I think you hit it, you hit the nail on the head there with, AI is going to replace jobs, AI is going to make this obsolete, etc. But the reality, especially in the communities and the businesses that we work with closely, is that humans are still extremely important in order to accomplish the task at hand, which is to keeping businesses and our community safe. And nothing is more powerful than a person having a presence, asking, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And so, w today, I think it's gonna be really interesting to dive in to see how can we really augment, those folks that are out in the field doing that work using AI, because we've seen it that the people that are on the front lines are not going to go anywhere. And those headlines, I think it's all smoke and mirrors.
100%. So to get through those smoke and mirrors a bit, we wanted to give a brief primer on some core concepts and vocabulary that you might have seen in news media on Twitter about AI. Want to first start with models, right? AI learns patterns from data and predicts what comes next. You can think of it like a big autocomplete when you type into a search bar in Google or in Chrome and you start typing a few letters and it finishes your sentence for you. That's what these AI models are doing. They're predicting what could come next, what should the next word in a sentence be. And it's good at it because of the sheer amount of training data that goes into these models and how they're being generated. They're trained on the internet. So whatever content, Reddit is a common forum to use training data for, uh, journalism, articles, anything like that. That's what gives the models the fundamental knowledge. So things like GPT or Opus from Anthropic, that's the fundamental knowledge. But models only know from there either what's trained or what's in your prompt. So when we talk about words like context, it's really important to provide the models the right amount of information around your prompt to get the most out of it. For instance, without your schedules, without your post orders, without your client history loaded in to a prompt or how you're using AI, it's not going to result in the best results for you as a business. Now, with that comes hallucinations, right? AI can generate the most plausible sounding answer with a bunch of confidence, but it doesn't necessarily know right from wrong. It won't tell you it's guessing. It won't. You will need to know the source of truth and what could be a good answer from a bad answer. And so when we think about how to put the guardrails around AI, it's ultimately around having a human in the loop and having someone review the outputs that it's going to be generating. Last couple terms here, agents. So you might have heard with an AI agent, an AI employee. This is something where AI can take some actions on its own without you having to prompt it via chat, for instance. Or maybe you do prompt it via chat and then an agent can take over and solve the issue that you're asking it to. So agents can be given advice, can be delegated tasks to, prompted by a human. And the last piece here, why it keeps accelerating. Every 3 to 6 months, there's more in the news cycle about a new model that one of these large companies has released. And why that is interesting, why it's exciting to be in technology at this time. Chips are getting cheaper, so GPUs that are used to train these models are getting smarter. There's more training data. Firms are learning how to make these smarter, and there's a litany of tests that each model gets put through for each of these companies to achieve certain new benchmarks. And so that's happening fast. The cost of running AI is also dropping fast. So every vendor is racing to add it. The technology is making the context that needs to get added to a single prompt smaller, ultimately resulting in what it can do more for your business. So it's not whether AI can do something on the bottom of this slide here. It's about how can AI perform reliably enough without oversight in your operating environment. Um, so I want to flip a little bit to why does this matter? And there's some stats here on the board shows other industries have adopted and are using AI successfully to solve challenges. So a McKinsey study showed that 88% of organizations are using AI in at least one business function. the use of generative AI, and how folks are experimenting with agentic AI is increasing. Investment, of course, is increasing. So, yeah, I'm curious to throw this back to you too. How are you using AI internally, maybe at Plix, and what are you seeing in terms of adoption trends?
Yeah, definitely. So I push my team heavily on making use of it, really as a tool, to augment our team members in accomplishing the tasks that we want them, to excel at. Um, and I see it not as replacing, but as really augmenting, making them better, making them faster. And so, for example, our engineers, they are using AI to help with product development, right? I still, I challenge them on being product engineers where, AI has really enabled them to write code faster, to validate it, to build things. But they are still the designers and really the thought leaders to figure out, they talk to our customers, they engage with our teams out in the field to really understand like what is the product that we should be building for our customers. And then we then use AI to generate the code that can then build the product and really make it as excellent as possible for our customers even faster. It used to be that an iteration cycle in building a product could take weeks, months. Now that iteration cycle has really shrunk, where we're able to develop features extremely fast for our customers. For example, one of our customers wanted our cameras to automatically activate when they arrive at a specific client site. What I think would have taken maybe a week or two of development, in sprinting fast and really being focused, now took a day, just because we're able to compress that iteration cycle. For other teams that aren't necessarily engineers writing code, they're using it for deep research, for understanding the market, for finding who are customers that we could potentially help support. Because as Jordan said, these AIs are trained on the entire internet, and so there's a lot of information, and so it's really it's replaced our need to Google things and use other tools with just asking questions and talking to something that can summarize the internet. Now, it's important, as Jordan you identified, is knowing how to use it reliably and in a way that you still fact check. And that's where I challenge our team to be thoughtful about what it spits out, not just take it and and use it, whole cloth, but really be thoughtful as to is this information correct? I have an academic research background, and so I challenge anything that comes through. And even when I see from my team, when I write them an email and I get AI generated back, I say, no, you like do it again and put it in your own words. Um, because humans are always going to be, the best thinkers out there, and AI is just a way to help us think faster, collect information better. But the what it will never replace is our ability to think critically.
100%. Um, Same, it's really good at some things. It's really good at taking a large amount of unstructured data, like call transcripts or our knowledge base internally at Belfry, and trying to synthesize an answer based on a really precise or general, even human-driven prompt. That said, right, like it's a new technology, and every new technology that's come in the last few decades is only useful if it helps solve a real problem. And so that's something that we'll talk more about today, and like where to take what AI is good at and apply it to the problems that have been around in the security industry for a while, but maybe we haven't been able to solve quite yet. So a lot of excitement there. A lot of industries are looking to make use of this new technology, but what are the risks involved? There's a few things here. Number one, it's laws and compliance risk. So there, especially in the security industry, if your reports are being pulled into legal proceedings and it's been generated by AI, or maybe some content or meaning was hallucinated, that introduces some risk. There are some laws and regulations that by and large have been state specific to date. California and New York have passed laws as well recently around using AI in employment decisions. So on the wage and hour side of the security guard services industry, that's something to watch out for. And then, of course, just accuracy, right? Relying on AI blindly to get you an answer, it's non-deterministic in nature, just like that autocomplete that's just filling the next part of the sentence. And so being able to check it, being able to give your models the most context it can take, in order to get you that precise answer is really important. So what's maybe an inconvenience if AI is wrong and writing an email or summarizing, text or something like that, if it fails in security, it's a liability. What makes it, what exacerbates those risks even more in security, right? You talked about just the liability environment. You talked about distributed workforce, how customers, right, are ultimately the ones to answer to for incident accountability, the regulated workforce, thin margins, employment decisions. So these are all aspects which give us pause a little bit. We want to get in front of these risks when assessing how to adopt AI. Johann, what have you heard and seen from your customers or prospective customers that give them pause in adopting AI?
I think that non-determinism that you pointed out is gives us all pause, right? Like both our customers in when we tell them, hey, Plix AI body cameras, right? It's like, okay, well, how do you put those two together, AI and body cameras? But then also for us as well, right? We, as I mentioned, we drive insights out of what we observe out in the field, but we don't want to drive the wrong insights, the inclusive insights, or even, more importantly, ones that make you make a decision that could be, detrimental to either a client or the business or that specific officer that's out in the field. And so we are very careful and test our solutions very rigorously to make sure that when we are making a decision, or when we use AI, it's in a way that is, gives you information that you may not necessarily have. But we lean more on the perspective of oversharing, and then people saying, "Oh, okay, this isn't necessarily, I don't care." Or this isn't necessarily problematic. And so specifically, our cameras will automatically activate in the field based on interactions, right? Of the officer's wearing a body worn and there's a conversation that's happening. And if the officer has forgotten to activate their camera and start recording, that camera can automatically start recording on behalf of the officer. Well, depending on where you draw the line as to like what is deemed to be something that is of escalatory nature, um, the camera could not activate at all. And so we've taken the approach of letting it be more, have more false positives effectively, which means that it'll activate a little bit more frequently. Which in some cases, right, the officers are like, hey, this thing always turns on, and it's frustrating. But what that means is it's also catching things more frequently, giving you that insight and ability. But so it's really towing that line, like how do you support the customers, give them the information, um, as quickly as possible without being too, generating too many alerts that could get in the way of the day-to-day operations that we do not want to get in the way of. The whole point of AI is really to save time, to drive insights faster, and to make our customers more efficient.
100%. I think that's a great segue into where we talk a lot about some theory, right? What AI is, what the headlines are out there, trying to sort out the signal from the noise. Let's talk about how it can actually apply today in your security operation. So security guard services have faced and are still facing many, many challenges. There's some existing problems, right? There's what tech has been able to help with and solve so far. But there's some limitations with the existing technology. We're going to share these slides and some of these materials out later after the session today. But today we want to zoom into two specific ones here. So around the operations aspects of running a security guard services firm, as well as the reporting and client visibility aspects. On the operations side, a problem that has always existed in this industry is that real-time visibility is difficult. Security companies have really small back office teams out of necessity, just given the generally low margin profiles of the businesses and the need to keep that back office pretty tight and efficient. But of course, all of your officers are distributed out in the field at sites where you might not have direct supervision over those officers. And so when something happens live at that site, an exception, someone doesn't clock in on time, you have a dark post, there's a severe incident that happens that you might need to get the client involved in, time is of the essence, and responding really quickly to that exception is important. It's also costly though today. So we'll talk about so far, there's a lot of vendors out there, a lot of tools like a Belfry that give live dashboards into these active shifts that are happening at any one company. They also send notifications when these exceptions happen. But this quote at the bottom, I think, is indicative of the problem that hasn't been solved yet, which is when we get a call off, we hurry up to find someone to take it, we call them or text them on the operations phone. There's still a lot of work that goes into responding to those exceptions once you see in your software solution that there is an issue at the site, either from that live dashboard or notification. Johan, you want to talk a little bit about the reporting and client visibility aspects here too?
Yeah, definitely. That's a place where we've seen, where AI can really help, and where it's in one of those places where it's not, it can be a starting point that then, just saves time. So our customers ask us a lot, like, hey, we observe what happened out in the field, but we'd like to make use of it and really share with our end customers and clients, all the great work that we're doing. And AI is a great tool that can summarize, that can give guards a starting point, or even just completely automate, some of the reporting that happened. And so that comes up a lot where we record footage, or our guards even generate reports. They'll press a button on the camera and just start dictating, here's what's going on, here's what I'm observing. And AI just takes all that language, puts it together in a concise report and shoots it directly to the client, right? That is time saved because the guard can do it as they're doing their walkthroughs, as they're out in the field, and they don't need to come back to the office, write something on pen and paper, or go to a computer. They're just voice dictating as if they're just narrating what they see. And that really helps save time. And that's a place where it's also low impact and risk, because if the report is wrong, they can always go in and edit it. But it gives them a really a starting point, an 80%, 90% starting point, that fills in a lot of gaps that otherwise would have had to be done manually.
Totally. And I think another quote that we have here is clients sometimes don't read the daily activity reports or incident reports if it just looks like too much information or it's too dense. So I think there's another opportunity here for AI to frame like what did happen today that should take your attention and that you should look at versus what happens every other day at your location.
Yep. It's great at spotting anomalies, right? It's for lack of a better word, it's like good to make it interesting, right? The mundane, okay, it's happening day in and day out. We know that it happens, and there's a checklist, but when there's something you need to pay attention to, the AI can also be prompted and tuned to spot, what looks different than the day to day, which is what we really search for, because that's what our customers want. That's what they demand, and that's the bar that we hold, ourselves to, which is just giving you visibility and information on the field.
100%. So like these two examples, just these two parts of your day-to-day workflow are areas where technology has helped. Software providers have sprung up in the industry to help security companies specifically with these problems. And it's come a ways from maybe a couple decades ago where these solutions weren't out there. And the solution was calling someone on a site phone or like call to check in or handwritten reports, right? But it still leaves some challenges. And I think that's where I think Johan and I both see an opportunity for AI to help, right? On the operation side, the back office is alerted, but still have to take some manual action to resolve an issue. On the reporting client visibility side, it still takes a lot of time to write a report for an officer in the field. Meaning could be hidden or missing, and spelling and grammar errors could come up in a report that take away from the client experience. Clients might not read through all of the reports because they can't see the anomalies of what happened today differently, than what happened yesterday. So we want to highlight again a couple key solutions here that Plix and Belfry have been thinking about when it comes to operations and client visibility. On the operations side, we'll talk about Belfry's Bell Dispatcher. So a way for security companies to get more leverage in their dispatch functions in their back office. instead of being prompted and alerted to respond to every incident and exception that comes out, how can Belfry actually help take the first step, still keep a human in the loop, and drastically reduce the time that your teams are spending uh, solving anomalies that maybe could be helped by somebody else, giving them more time to be out in the field with your officers or your clients. And then Plix and Johann will talk about the safety inbox that Plix has released as well. Um, there's a poll here in the chat, so curious to hear how you've thought about using AI within your firm, your hesitancy, your openness to using it. So fill that out when you get a second. Johann would love to turn it to you though to talk a little bit about the safety inbox product that you guys have released.
Definitely. So, the problem that we see and which affects most body camera platforms is just the sheer amount of footage that gets recorded. The value of a body worn is to have the footage in case somebody, or there's a dispute, there's a he said, she said, having that footage is incredibly valuable to be able to say, here's what happened, here's our side of the story, or here's some footage that we want to take action on. But it's just so much footage to then have to go through and watch and potentially, have to really make sense of. Um, and what we identified using some of the research that we did both at Stanford and academia, but then continuing to work very closely with our customers, is what if we could, trim that time down to just showing you the relevant information and giving you a starting point to watch. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't watch what led up to that incident, because in most cases, right, you really want to understand what led up to this and what actually happened. But we want to give you the exact sort of breakdown and timeline of events so that you can just watch what's relevant and be able to jump around. And so the way that we accomplish that is by analyzing videos that come into our platform and using both the audio and the actual footage and the understanding of the videos and the frames to drive those insights. And so we turn that footage into structured insights by automatically summarizing it, surfacing key moments, and then flagging some of these safety events that then our customers can just go into this inbox and review footage where they have an automated summary of what exactly happened, a timeline of events that then they can directly click and say, hey, I want to go to this time in the video where this is what happened. And typically it follows, a pretty standard flow where if there's a trespass, it'll describe, what led to that event, the first the first contact of the officer or of the guard with the person, some sort of altercation or event if there is one, and then, a conclusion and a summary. And so the AI there is both looking at the language that is said, like, was it too aggressive? Was the guard effectively de-escalating and using the SOPs that your business has trained them on? Or is there something that you could coach them on, or that you want to highlight to the rest and say, hey, this is how we should be handling these. And so it's really used not just as a tool to surface up these moments, but also as a training and a coachable moment. And so here, we're seeing kind of like a video of that where this was actually a guard that identified a child that was running around in a lake, unsupervised. And so being able to surface that up very quickly then showed, first you know, uh, prevented a pretty bad situation, but then also highlighted just that guard doing great work to reunite the parents with their child. When he said, Where's mommy?" and like really looking. And so that was one way where it saved the business a lot of time to find what exactly happened. Did this guard take swift action? Work very closely with the lifeguards that were on scene as well, to reunite the parents and the child. So it's not just about finding pretty intense moments, but also those hero moments where those guards are really going above and beyond for the business.
It's awesome to see, and probably would have taken a lot of sifting through footage, right, ordinarily to pull out this moment.
Exactly.
Um,
And with a huge team, you may not even have, the business may not even have heard about it for days or for weeks. And so it's also about just knowing what's happening as quickly as possible to be able to tell that person, hey, amazing job, to then be able to tell the business this business specifically is has guards out in a big park. And so they're helping keep it safe and monitor for incidents. And so they can also tell their client, hey, here's what we're doing. We're glad we're here to help you guys, have do a great event.
see. Yeah, I think it's a really core problem, right? The amount of data that has to be sifted through, which otherwise would be really manual. I think that's an awesome application of this new technology to, a really otherwise difficult problem to solve. So thanks for sharing that one. Want to share a little bit about how Belfry has thought about AI as well. Um, Specifically around the dispatch problem. So the pain that we see today is that security operations, of course, are running 24/7, but core management doesn't, right? And so site exceptions like call-offs or no-shows or abandoned posts or inactive officers, right? They're very, very frequent, and the stakes are high to address them as quickly as humanly possible, right? The stakes are high for your client contracts. To be able to bill those minutes in between shifts that could go dark. Now, the solutions to date, right, are a combination of technology and people. So as I mentioned earlier, tools like Belfry can give dispatch teams the real-time visibility into the field about where their officers are, their locations, are folks clock in or not at the right time, have they been inactive for a certain stretch of time during the shift, meaning they haven't completed a tour, scanned checkpoints, or filed any reports. Have they left the job site as well? So those alerts happen, but still humans are quite in the loop and almost driving the exception resolutions. So, with smaller operators, we often see the owners themselves just perpetually on call, being woken up at 2 a.m. when someone doesn't clock in or abandons a post and they get a call from a client. At larger operators, we see 24/7 dispatch teams or even outsourced dispatch teams being used, which are really costly. And also, those resources could go to better client service or better officer service and training, which ultimately supports your value proposition. And so when we thought about this problem, we thought, how could Belfry, and we're calling our Belfry dispatcher Bell, how can she handle the frontline resolution autonomously, or at least with a human in the loop, right? Proactively just checking on those notifications that we're already sending our customers when exceptions happen, but now contacting officers, capturing a disposition. So are they gonna be late for their shift? When are they gonna arrive? Notifying supervisors or back office folks so that maybe what starts out as 100 exceptions can be whittled down to 10 that really need the supervisor action, and then write those dispositions back to the time card. So the notes are captured and exceptions are recorded for officer performance use cases or any client questions later on. And so that's the problem that we wanted to solve. How could we get dispatchers, get supervisors, and back office team members more into the field to be supporting their teams and supporting their clients? So, of course, like a very somewhere that AI can really help in that first line of communications via texts or calls to your officers to just understand, are they on their way for a shift that they've missed a clock in for? What's the reason they're late? What's the time they said they're going to arrive? And if they don't arrive and don't clock in to a shift by the time they said, reach back out again, right? And have another conversation. So some feedback from our customers that we've seen in our beta program, we've handled about 6,000 exceptions. Most of these are missed clock-ins, some abandoned posts, some other ones as well. About 46% of these sessions were outside of business hours. So call business hours Monday to Friday, 8 a.m.-ish to 6 p.m. 46% when firms are it's really tight to staff a team or dispatch person to handle those exceptions after hours. Bell has been that first line of defense. On average, firms have all seen an increase in on-time performance. So officers showing up to shifts on time after starting with Bell because officers know to expect a text and a notification and trying to justify why they're late if they aren't showing up on time. One firm saw a 7.5% or point increase on their on-time performance. What we've also seen is officers clocking in themselves at a much higher clip. Usually when officers aren't clocking in and the dispatch team is monitoring Belfry, they might clock in for the officer on their behalf if there's some communications behind the scenes. But that has the potential to lead to time card errors, which lead to payroll errors and upset employees. And so we're also seeing an increase in the officers doing that themselves, which lead to fewer of those errors down the road. So just some illustrative examples here, right? An exception queue of what these missed clock-ins or exceptions are. It's also Bell is also being proactive in some ways. So if a shift is not confirmed a certain number of hours before that, Bell can automatically text the officer to just double check to ensure that they're going to be showing up for their shift later on, which just decreases the potential for no-shows or call-offs, or at least gives the back office team time to resolve those issues before they happen. So here's an example of one potential conversation that an officer might have with Bell. They're running late. Bell goes, "What time do you expect to arrive? This is when your shift is." The officer says 10 minutes, and we say, "Reply C to confirm you're running late, and we'll arrive at that time." The time card gets adjusted automatically with notes from Bell's session. The back office gets a push notification knowing that Bell has already taken care of this exception. The officer is going to run late. The back office does not need to do and to make another call to that employee yet and can continue from there. This is an example of what it looks like in action in the portal. So going through, responding directly to those shifts, into those exceptions, and saving the back office ultimately a ton of extra work. Great. We have about 15 or so minutes left and also want to leave time for some questions. We'd love to transition a little bit to a practical adoption plan. The poll that just went out, actually a little bit earlier, well, there's another poll that went out just now around your most likely and least likely fields or areas to adopt AI. But something that surprised me, Johann, I don't know if you saw it, but 48% of the respondents said they're already using AI in their day-to-day right now. One, I'd love if in the chat folks would maybe share an application, something they've been using, an LLM or a vendor, how they've been making use of AI in the day-to-day today. But yeah, curious your thoughts on that one, Johann.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think it's like, I push my team and those around me, even, parents and spouse that may not necessarily be in the tech world and thinking like what is the latest. And like I think once you start using it, it's one of those things, it's a comfort thing. Once it's like going from Google to then chat, it's just like it ends up being the new norm. Um and I think I'm super excited about this next section because it's like, how can you crawl, walk, run, and like really, really dip your toes and realize this does save you a lot of time, um, personally, but then also professionally. You can then focus on the things that really matter, which is engaging with your clients, being on the phone, with the guards when they need help, and the mundane and the repetitive can be augmented and then potentially, as you just showed with Bell, entirely replaced once that trust level is really there. So I think it's a great way to really get up and running is to use it personally and then, bite off more risk by doing it professionally.
100%. Love it. Let's think a little bit about adoption and kind of the steps to get there. Um, we kind of put together an adoption maturity model for security firms of sorts, and there's a bunch of different levels. And I think some of the workflows and modules can all be at a different level of adoption. For instance, you might really shy away from using AI in recruiting or HR. You might think operations and reporting is maybe a level 4, level 5, right? So this doesn't have to be across your whole organization. You can break it down by segment of the business. But we've scoped it out, starting at level 1, right? They're manual workflows, something that the human has to really drive and complete on a day-to-day basis to accomplish a task. And today, that might be getting HR documentation sent out to an employee to e-sign at the end of a exception report. Level two is rules-based automation. So firms might be using like smart scheduling in their tools that take a bunch of different data and put it together in a really easy to use way that's deterministic, right? Meaning the inputs will lead to the same outputs given the same information. And that's really helpful in areas where there's a lot of risk involved in the answer that your firm puts out, like filling a shift, or sometimes, right, like making a hiring decision. Level three is AI assisted recommendations. So I think you saw some of those today with the demos from Belfry and from Plix. So AI taking the lead in some aspect of a workflow, like looking at a bunch of different data, but then ultimately human in the loop taking that action, either for a client or for an officer. Semi-autonomous workflows, meaning like maybe these agentic workflows, a buzz term that you've heard, where I can do a repeatable task for you given a set of constraints, and the autonomous decisions at the bottom. So this one where a risk level would be on the extreme side we've rated, but are there areas in can you look to vendors or build something internally yourself with some of these new LLM tools where AI can just run on its own without human input?
I think Jordan, the interesting part from sort of like couching what the risk level means is like what is the we always think about like what is the cost of getting this wrong or like what is the worst that could happen when you do this, right? And I think manual workflows, right? Like we do a lot of reporting where our customers, some of them want there to be a human in a loop, like what you've described. Like it's a level four semi-autonomous where it creates a report, the starting point, based on what is seen and heard out in the field. And some of our customers opt to then have those reports automatically go from the officer dictating to then be submitted and then potentially sent directly to the client with like zero human involvement. And some others, opt for like more of like a level three where it's an AI assisted recommendation, right? It creates a report and then the onus is still on the guard and the supervisor and the chain of command to review it before it goes out to the client. But that then we challenge our customers and they ask themselves, right? Like, what if, the worst report went out? Would that be detrimental? And everybody has their own risk tolerance there. Um, but it's always an interesting conversation to have internally for us as well. It's like, what's the cost of getting this wrong, right? As I mentioned, our alerts, they if there's too many alerts, it's annoying, but it's not detrimental because you're just getting more information. The cost of not getting any alerts could be pretty detrimental because you're missing out on some key information that then our customers can be taking action on, because their guards could be in a potentially dangerous situation. So it's a definitely would challenge everybody to think through always like what is the like risk in terms not just like, hey, how do we feel about this, but like what is the operational impact that this can really have.
I think that's a really good framing. And I'd say like the complementary aspect of it is how confident are you in the technology to solve the problem? So like
Yep.
what's the worst that could happen? And like, all right, where on that spectrum can technology get you there or can AI get you there? Um, yeah, will someone think it's AI slop if they get an automatically generated summary at the top of their DARs every day? Maybe, but is it that important? Is it that risky to the business? Like best case, it's actually surfacing that anomaly that they might have had to dig through a 20-page PDF report to find. Worst case, yeah, maybe they don't read that and it decreases their trust in the summary a little bit, but there are ways, where that anomaly will be flagged the next day, that will get their attention. So I think it's a really helpful way to frame it to security firms. Um, So that's kind of how to think maybe about adoption and think about it as this poll question is sharing, right, across the different workflows or components of the business. Of course, like there's no doubt that AI can create a strategic advantage for you. And so encouraging you to start sooner than later on assessing where you can apply this in your business, right? Helps run leaner back offices, improve client transparency and just accountability to your clients and what they want to see from security providers. Of course, reducing payroll errors, competing against larger nationals with just like a more nimble back office team and more nimble insights for your clients, improving scheduling coverage. So there's no shortage of possible outcomes that AI can help solve. This goes back to that question we were just talking about is where's the risk lie and how good is this technology at solving the problem? And ultimately, like AI might not be the right technology to solve every problem. And something rules-based or something manual might be the best possible way, and just given the problem itself. And so at the same time, when thinking about adoption, think about like, is it just throwing technology at the problem because it's cool, or is it throwing technology at the problem because it's been really hard to solve otherwise, and this can give us a leg up where it hadn't before.
It's interesting. I just looking at the poll that just came through. We were talking about, or I was talking about, AI for client communications, and that's where I totally understand, right? There's more sensitivity there to what goes out to the clients, and that's riskier. But sales and marketing, right? The cost of potentially getting it wrong may be a little bit lower in using AI. And this just what I'm guessing at from the respondents, but would love to see, some folks in the chat drop like why they answered one versus the other. But seems like overwhelmingly there's, either it's possible or a high likelihood that there's interest in applying AI to some of today's challenges, which is great to see.
100%. Yeah, the probably nots. Yeah, client communications, like you said, payroll and billing, HR and recruitment. So to me, the trend is like those human-based interactions or like the things that really differentiate your business. You don't really want to automate away with a bot, right? You want to supplement that human touch that your business differentiates on with some help, right? And maybe focus your team on those like what's maybe more human interactions they can do as opposed to the automated emails that might go out daily. A couple red lines that we recommend firms defining internally, right? Johann, you had a great point earlier on like what's the worst case scenario, right? What is the escalation trigger if AI is wrong? But yeah, defining explicitly where AI can assist, where it should not decide, who should sign off. It's no secret that just having someone internally to own AI adoption, quote unquote, is probably a great thing, a great recommendation to see how quickly your organization can define these red lines and can actually advance on that adoption matrix that we shared earlier. And then questions to ask any vendor, right? Like some of these tools or some of like AI approaches, you might be able to implement pulling data out of your existing vendors, uploading it somewhere else and just getting insights from it, or helping respond to client emails, for instance, or developing quotes for clients, or analyzing your income statements. But you'll also lean on vendors to actually implement AI in some of these workflows as well. So questions to ask, right? Any vendor, how can you see and the reasoning of how AI came to a certain conclusion? If it's taking some of those more semi-autonomous workflows, can you override its decision? Is there an audit trail? Is bias testing included, which often just comes with the fundamental models, that are bias tested often, and who's liable if it's wrong, right? Ultimately, as a security firm, right, if you're performing the services, you're taking on liability for the decisions that AI can generate if you're relying on it without the checks and balances. But making sure those checks and balances are there for you to step in on. All right. I think lastly, just want to end on an optimistic note. This graphic here is an interesting one where the massive wall of gray dots that you see are 6.8 billion people in the world who've never used AI in any form, right? The tiny green strip here at the bottom are users or people who have used some of the free chatbots like ChatGPT or Claude. The yellow here are folks that pay for AI services today. And the red are the ones who are using, 2 to 5 million people who are using AI for coding and development, meaning the vast, vast majority of people and professionals are not using AI in their day-to-day right now. And so there's a ton of opportunity for your company to get started sooner than the other, billions of folks worldwide, but also the other security companies, serve better your clients, right? In some of these applications that we've talked through today.
Yeah, it's definitely an exciting time to get started because the barrier to entry is so low, right? You can just go to chat and start talking and asking questions. And I think, like I mentioned earlier, getting familiar with AI and what it can do and what it can't do, then gives you ideas into how it can be built into the business in those, like as Jordan said, those low risk areas where there's a manual workflow to potentially automate and or augment to say, hey, there's this thing that I'm kind of confused about. Can you help me reason through it? And it's like somebody, it's like an extra person there that's thinking through it, where you can ask all the questions, no matter how simple, no matter how complicated, and use it to augment. I find myself, just using it as a thought partner. Used to be my wife, and she said, "Hey, stop getting on, stop asking me all these silly questions." No, but really as something that can really augment workflows, and be there to just help. So I heavily encourage everybody to if you haven't used it yet, seems like most have dipped their toes, to continue to dive deeper and to also challenge it and then to we're happy to work with our customers closely to figure out how can we add more value to our products to then help you save time, protect revenue, and drive more revenue at the end of the day.
100%. I love that. And yeah, I'd say, there's some Belfry customers here in the room. One challenge, one piece of homework that you might be able to do right now is go to the bell tower for any one of your sites, export out a CSV of all the activities or all the reports that have been done at that site location over the last maybe 30 days, 90 days, so on, and put it into Claude or ChatGPT and ask it for insights. Or time card data, right? Export a CSV and put that into Claude, ask it for insights. It doesn't even have to be prompted more specifically than that, but I think that'll start to get the juices flowing of, what could AI really help with? And of course, lean on your vendors, talk to your account managers, your CSMs, your vendors about these sorts of potential applications, right? How are your vendors thinking about it differently? Um, how can you start testing, some of their new solutions that they're starting to offer? So with that, we really appreciate everyone's time. Hope that was quite informative around just a start, right? This is a conversation. It's a new technology, right? Like the internet, smartphones, like it's no different from those adoption waves and, hesitancy and kind of weariness about, how this new technology can like change our professional lives and our personal lives. But ultimately starting to think about these questions now, that adoption matrix, the risks, the benefits, could give you a leg up, when it comes to providing better service for your clients. We're happy to answer any questions in Q&A. I'll look
Amazing.
back at that.
We did get one from Kaylee during the Bell section. She asked if Bell would be able to bill the client based on the missed times. If I assume this is based on if an officer were to clock in a couple minutes late, could it adjust that invoice?
So if an officer clocks in late, it would, I mean, depending on how your firm bills, right? It would just bill the actual time that the officer clocked in, or it could bill the scheduled time for that initial shift. But those notes that Bell picks up, those dispositions from the conversation with the officer, will be added to the time card as well. So as you're looking to bill your client and going through invoices, that'll be flagged for your review.
Great, great. Yeah, I think that answers your question. She just chatted back. Awesome. And then we have another one, which you actually just kind of answered, Jordan, from Zach. He said, if AI is only as smart as the data we give it, how can we feed LLMs info on our business?
Yeah. I just shared a little bit at the end. Johan, any other thoughts on that one too?
So the question was if the LN is only as smart as what it's learned, like how can we feed
Feed it.
Give it
data
more context.
more context? Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think, um Jordan describing, some of the information that's already in the Belfry platform to then chat through and get a feel for like what can it do with information that it has, I think is a great starting point. And then, working closely with Jordan's team, with my team to then add more information because yes, it is limited by the information that it has. The being building AI tools for the past 10, 15 years, I always ground myself in saying it's only as good as a human. Um, it does have more knowledge than what a human has, but these hallucinations that Jordan was talking about at the beginning are a very real thing. And so making sure that you know what it's getting and sort of in which direction it can make some conclusions based on data, I think is extremely important. And so I would say, play around with some of the data that you do have access to that you can reason about on like a small scale, and then grow from there to really understand like, hey, how can I push it? Can I ask it questions where it should be telling me, I don't have this information, thus I can't make a conclusion. Then you know that it'll kind of like that the AI will limit itself and not just make something up because it feels like it needs to answer you.
One thing I'd also encourage everyone to do is, it's something that I've challenged our team to do here at Belfry, and we're just seeing better results from, is document as much as possible your internal business processes and decisions. And document like as in literally write out. It's very common, right, in this industry with post orders, and so like the operating procedures for a specific site. But I'd encourage everyone to document their internal business processes. So, for instance, when there is a missed clock in notification, what sequential steps is your team doing in order to solve that problem? There's another common term we didn't talk about, but it's like markdown files. You might have heard about that, or skills files, right? That Claude can use to just execute a consistent process over and over again. So the more you document what good looks like and what best practices should be, the better AI is going to execute, right, that non-deterministic process in the way that you want it to. Something we're thinking about our Bell implementation as well, right? We've developed what we call run books or SOPs within each of abandoned post, missed clock-ins, so we can follow a set of written instructions on a repeatable basis to solve any one of these problems or based on the dispositions that we get back from officers.
Nice. And then we have a question from Daniel. He asked, and it's in the chat, if you'd like to read through it, but it's what are your experiences so far with the initial investments in physical technology needed to implement and incorporate AI for the business?
Johan, you want to start with that one on the physical side?
Yeah. We work closely with other companies that also, put hardware out in the field. Um, and AI is not going to replace building anything anytime soon. I think it's going to augment kind of like the design and the ability to make products. But there's still something physical that needs to be made, and the robots are coming. They're probably going to take a while to really be here and build stuff. But what it does enable us to do is build like build better software to run on those and then understand better what's happening with a device. Like we use AI to help our customers troubleshoot their body cameras. Um, and that is very valuable. Um, I think that's the main place where we're using AI in sort of like the physical technology space. I don't know, Daniel, if that's exactly the question you had. Happy to then see, if you want to put a follow up there. But yeah, in really understanding what's happening out in the field, you get a lot of telemetry from these devices. You need to make sense of it. There's potentially errors. There's a lot of GPS data that then we all reason about what is actually happening so then we can give our customers sort of very succinct and simple responses to like here's what to do. And our team, there's a lot of discussion right now that's going on with some customers that that have some of those questions.
Great. And
So,
then,
time, unfortunately. Um, we have a couple questions. I think Kaylee just had another question, and Daniel. We're happy to follow up offline or directly connect with any of you guys with other questions. We really appreciate everyone's time today on this like very important and exciting topic for the industry, and uh, happy to be partners to you as you think through your adoption matrix for your firm.
amazing.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. It was great to chat. And thank you, Belfry and Jordan, for putting on such a great webinar.
Awesome. Thank you all.